It was a late summer evening when the earth beneath the rural town of Windley gave up one of its darkest secrets. As dawn's first light pierced the trees, a dog wandered into an old, abandoned property on the outskirts of town. In its mouth, it carried a fragment of something too human to ignore. The bone, an old, cracked femur, belonged to a woman who had been buried for far longer than anyone in Windley had realized. The remains were wrapped in layers of decay, but what shocked investigators most was not just the woman's burial. It was the fact that she had been dead for several years, and yet the body that had been laid to rest in this shallow grave wasn't the same woman everyone thought was missing. It wasn't Megan Holloway, and the discovery raised a chilling question. If this wasn't Megan's body, then where was Megan? Windley, a small town nestled between towering pine forests and winding country roads, had always prided itself on its sense of community. The sort of place where everybody knew everyone's business, and the peace of the small town was never disturbed by anything too tragic. People spoke in whispers of long-forgotten crimes and distant family feuds, but there hadn't been a real tragedy in years. Megan Holloway was part of Windley's tapestry. Born and raised in the town, Megan was an unassuming 28-year-old woman who worked as a teacher at the local elementary school. She had never been the type to seek attention, yet her kind smile and down-to-earth nature made her one of the town's favorites. Friends described her as thoughtful and reliable, the kind of woman who would drop everything to help a neighbor in need. But 3 years ago, Megan had vanished without a trace. It was a Friday evening, and Megan had stopped by her friend Jenny's house to drop off a cake she'd baked for Jenny's son's birthday. As they chatted outside, Megan mentioned stepping out for a brief walk to clear her mind, but she never came back. Jenny assumed Megan had decided to visit another friend or head home early, until the calls came, the unanswered texts, the growing hours of silence. A search party was organized, but no clues were found. Megan was officially labeled a missing person, but the investigation quickly lost momentum. People in town whispered about an old boyfriend or possible mental health struggles, but nothing ever panned out. Some thought she might have just wanted to start a new life elsewhere, and over the years, the investigation grew colder. The dog's discovery was just the beginning. The area where the dog had found the bone was an old hunting property, long abandoned and now overgrown with weeds. The place had been an eyesore for years, and no one had bothered to investigate it. However, when detectives arrived, it became clear that this wasn't a routine case. They combed through the area and uncovered a shallow grave beneath a thick layer of leaves and dirt. The remains were in terrible condition, but forensic experts were able to confirm that the body belonged to a woman, and she had been dead for several years, at least 3. What shocked them more was the unusual condition of the remains. Megan Holloway had been presumed dead for just over 2 years, but the body found in the grave had been buried for far longer, at least 5 years. And yet, the grave wasn't some long-forgotten burial site. The remains, when examined, showed signs of being carefully placed and covered, not just hastily discarded. The key finding came with the woman's identification. The body was not Megan's. It belonged to someone else. But who? Detective Olivia Daniels, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving cold cases, was assigned to the case. As she dug into the details, several strange and unsettling patterns began to emerge. The first lead came from the family. Megan's mother, a once optimistic woman who had clung to the hope that her daughter would return, now had to face the terrifying reality that something far more sinister had been at play. She shared old family photos and medical records, and something peculiar caught Olivia's eye. A few faint scars on Megan's arm that had been overlooked before. They appeared to be the result of a knife wound or a sharp object, an injury that was never mentioned in the earlier investigations. At the same time, Olivia began to follow up on the mysterious woman found in the grave. Her name, as it turned out, was Linda Martin, a woman who had been missing for 5 years, long before Megan had disappeared. Linda had been living in a neighboring town, and her disappearance had never been linked to Windley. She was a troubled woman, with a history of addiction and failed relationships, but her family swore they had never heard from her after she left their house one cold November evening.
Now the detectives were dealing with 2 seemingly unrelated disappearances. How had Linda ended up buried in Megan's grave? Was it a case of mistaken identity, or had Megan been the intended victim all along? The case twisted in unexpected directions, revealing the psychological complexity of everyone involved. Olivia soon realized that the connections between the missing persons were more than just circumstantial. Megan's disappearance had been a case of mystery, but there was something darker behind it all. The small, seemingly perfect town of Windley had its own secrets. Megan's best friend, Jenny, confessed under pressure that she had witnessed a confrontation between Megan and an unnamed man weeks before Megan went missing. The man had been angry, and Jenny had never spoken of it, fearing retribution. Meanwhile, Linda's troubled past gave Olivia a glimpse into the mind of the woman buried in her place. Linda had a history of self-destructive behavior and had been known to get involved with dangerous people. What if someone had been using Linda as a pawn in a larger scheme? The investigation uncovered layers of deception. In a shocking turn of events, it was revealed that Jenny had been having an affair with Megan's fiancé, Aaron, a man who had been the prime suspect in Megan's initial disappearance. But Aaron swore he had no idea what happened to Megan, though his alibi kept shifting. As the web unraveled, Olivia discovered a journal that Megan had kept hidden away in her apartment, documenting strange encounters with a man who had been following her. The man turned out to be none other than Linda's ex-boyfriend, a dangerous figure who had a history of stalking women. The revelation brought a new sense of urgency to the case. It seemed that Linda's ex-boyfriend had been responsible for both women's disappearances. His obsessive behavior had turned deadly, and he had orchestrated the twisted burial swap as part of his plan to erase all evidence of his crimes. In the end, the case of Megan Holloway's disappearance was solved, but at a tremendous cost. The man responsible for the murders, Linda's ex, was apprehended, though not without a violent confrontation. The town of Windley would never be the same again. The impact of the case rippled through the community. Long-standing friendships were shattered, and the town's once peaceful image was forever tainted. Megan's family, though relieved to have answers, would never fully recover from the trauma of losing their daughter in such a brutal, senseless way. As for Olivia Daniels, she left Windley with a heavy heart, knowing that, even though justice had been served, the scars of this crime would last far longer than the investigation itself.